I'm going to be on loud and clear in a few minutes to have a conversation about the NBA players that went on strike. I want to repeat this story because the story correlates to something else and a point that I try to continuously make to the left and even progressive Democrats who are still in the party, the political equivalent of battered wives. I call you that lovingly, also because it's true. The Milwaukee Bucks decided to boycott the playoff game following the shooting of Jacob Blake by the Kenosha police. This is not a boycott. By technical definition, it is a strike. This cascaded into a wave of strikes across American sports on Wednesday night. Soon after, the Wisconsin-based Bucks decided they wouldn't play, the NBA announced the postponement of 5 of 3 different playoff series. Bucks versus Orlando Magic, Houston Rockets versus Oklahoma City Thunder, and Los Angeles Lakers versus Portland Trailblazers. Hours later, WNBA, 5 Major League Soccer, and 3 Major League Baseball teams or games were called off as athletes acted in solidarity with the Bucks players and decided to strike. Kenny Smith also walked off the set of TNT for solidarity. Think about what they did. They don't have a contract that say they can do this. They did this because something in them, conscience, thought to themselves, this needs to change. And to the degree that we can put pressure on our society and make this known, we will do so, even at our own risk, at our own peril. They did that. That's a phenomenal thing. I've never seen that in sports, at least from the time to my existence, and yet they did that. Right here. 12 million people, 12 million Americans lost their health care, employer-based health care, because of coronavirus. But understand, they're losing this in the middle of a pandemic. Why did they lose their health care? They lost their health care because it was employer-based. And the moment that they lost their jobs, which, 20, 30 million people did, went up in smoke, and retail evaporated, and those people who was working at that retail, 30% not coming back. Their insurance went with it. 12 million Americans lost their health insurance in the midst of a pandemic. Before COVID, after Obamacare, that they continuously screamed, this is universal health care. It's not universal health care. 20 million people, 26 million people, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry, 27 million people, nearly, after they passed Obamacare, did not have insurance. Combine that with the additional 12 million, and that number will continue, by the way, as the unemployment count continues to go up, which is now continuing to go up as the PPP or loans have stopped, and as those people stop getting the additional monies for unemployment. Contrast that with the Democratic National Committee Convention and the Republican National Committee Convention. What do you get from that? This is real pain, real catastrophe that is driven entirely through policy in the United States. This is not like this abroad. 12 million people have lost health care. And you can't get Joe Biden and the Democratic Party to back Medicare for All, a policy with 88% support. I don't give a shit if Satan himself is on the other side pushing, running in the Republican Party. I don't care. If the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden cannot get behind a policy with 88% support, he is not getting my support. And fact of the matter is, if lefties, the battered wives of the Democratic Party, was willing to say the same, you would get that policy because they would have no option but to lose to Trump otherwise. Understand what that means. Put that in real terms. If you and 20 million people within the context of the party and outside of that party stood outside and said, we're done. It is unconscionable that you do not accept the policy that has 88% support within the context of the Democratic Party, 70% support outside of the party, in the midst of a pandemic where 12 million people currently have lost their health care. In the pandemic! Am I insane in pointing that out and how ludicrous that is? Policy driven. Bezos, $200 billion. Gates, $100 billion. And you're making it a conversation to me that this is not something that you're going to appropriate. And all of these lefty networks, be it Sam Seed or be it TYT, be it whatever the other fuck lefty networks that call themselves lefty networks, are still willing to say, we're going to back Joe Biden. One concentration camp less. Missing the point that if you are in any level of a representative government or in a democratic society, and you are in the midst of a pandemic, something where the arc of history is screaming that those people appropriate those policies, not entirely because 88% support it, because it's right. It is morally and ethically right. But no, Joe Biden will tell you to kick rocks. Nancy Pelosi will say kick rocks. The Democratic Party, within the context of their platform, will tell you to fuck off. And you will say, okay, got to vote for Biden. Are you in a representative government or not? I don't give a shit if they lose. Are you in a representative government or not? Are you in the midst of a pandemic? And are people losing their health insurance in the midst of a pandemic? Do 88% of Democrats support this policy? All of these things are yes. 70% of the public support it. That answer is also yes. If you are indeed in a representative government, and if that number of people support that policy, and if you have a pandemic that is screaming for that policy to be implemented, how the fuck does Bernie Sanders, all of these lefties, and all of these other groups come out and say, yeah, you got to back Joe Biden? Fuck the policy. No, not fuck the policy. It's the opposite of that. The moral choice, the ethical choice, the honest to God choice. If you are a lefty, if you give a shit about Medicare for all, I don't even give a shit if you're a Republican. It's to stand outside and say, we're done with this. Just like those NBA players. We're done. Why do you think they have strikes? Why do you think they have strikes? They have strikes because they get to a point and say, we're done. It's not that the strike doesn't have risk for the individuals that are involved in a strike. It's just they get to the point of saying, this is too much. We would rather let it tank as opposed to persisting in something that is not in our interest. We're being fucked over and exploited. That is your Democratic Party. And that is you, the part being fucked over. And incentivizing the fucking over in that way. I am making the point to you that if you want to get anything accomplished, anything, and you have a policy that has that much support, and you can't even get that over the finish line, then any priority you have as a lefty is off the table. It doesn't even matter anymore. You are that captured as a party and as a group. And yeah, they're going to go out Republicans. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't the husband cheat on the wife if the wife is not going to say shit about it and accept it? That's why I call you battered wives. I'm making the point to you that the ethical choice, the non-cowardly choice, is to stand outside with the political space and say, you get our vote when you back our interests. And one policy, if nothing else, that demands to be implemented at this point, that demands to be supported. I shouldn't even have to make this argument. In a rational society, I would never have to make this argument because it would be appropriated under normal circumstances. I am making the point that the way to deal with this, you get our vote, you accept the policies, and nothing else. If 10, 20, 30 million people did that and said, you get our vote if you accept our policy, you will get Medicare for all. Or the Democratic Party would be willing to tank it to a man they're calling the apocalypse because they didn't want to appropriate a policy that had overwhelming majority, nearly unanimous support. How cowardly are you to not back the interests of America and not stand in that very specific position? Like, share,